Welcome to the Lakers Central Podcast, where I discuss the most famous basketball team on the planet with the biggest, brightest, and up-and-coming voices in sports and culture. Before I get into today's show, hey, folks, you see the emblem on my hat. Go check out the new Crossover podcast. We just launched it today. Shout out to Wes Alston, founder and NBA agent, RLA Management. It's on Apple. It's on Spotify. It's on Stitcher. Go check it out. Matter of fact, shout out to Stitcher. They're one of the sponsors of Lakers Central and of Crossover Media. So use promo code Crossover. You get 30 days free of Stitcher Premium. So check it out. Lakers got a big win, Vinay. I know you're happy, man.
I am happy. We started our weekend off on Saturday, early morning with a win. Braun looked great. AD looked great. The bench looked great. Kuzma rebounded from a kind of shaky game or first scrimmage, so that was good. And then they held them all out today. So I was curious to see kind of how Dion and Markieff and JR and all the other guys. I mean, granted, they're probably not going to see too much time in the playoffs. Dion and Markieff probably definitely will, maybe even JR. But it was just good to see that they pulled out the win today. And I'm sure all the fans of the South Bay Lakers were happy to see Talen Horton-Tucker get a lot of time on the court. He looked pretty good, if you ask me, for a G Leaguer. He looked pretty good against that Wizards team, their B team. So overall, I'm happy, man. Everything that we kind of expected to see, at least out of like Dion and JR, we saw that today.
Yep.
JR was hitting some really wide, a lot of catch and shoot wide open threes. He was putting the ball on the floor, finding his teammates. And I mean, you can see it on the timeline. I think everybody's on Waiters Island. All of Lakers Nation is on Waiters Island now. I know it's just scrimmages, but just the difference of a guy who's confident with the ball in his hand, going to the rim, kicking out to his teammates. I don't think this is going to be the same team. Schematically, the team will be the same, but I don't think the talent level on the team, like the strengths of the team, are going to be the same when the season starts. And I think any scouts or teams that think they've got the Lakers figured out are going to run into Dion at that backup point guard spot probably. And they're in for a rude awakening. And we finally got to see Waiters and Caruso together at the same time. That offensive defensive responsibility. And it looked pretty good, man. Caruso was lighting it up in the third quarter. So I'm happy, man.
Hey, look, man, we saw exactly what we wanted to see out of the Lakers' new additions, right? So J.R. Smith got hot, 6 of 7 from three-point land. He's the kind of guy where any given night, like you don't expect him to go for 20 every night in a row, but in one of these playoff games, one of these seeding games, he's going to get hot just like he did today out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. He's going to light a team up. Dion, 18 points. Dion brings to this team one of the biggest things they were missing all season long, and that's a dude that can create his own shot, another ball handler that can get to the rim. Like granted, this was against, G Leaguers and the third string guys and all that, but still, it's not like Anthony Davis and LeBron was out there with these guys. And so you saw Dion bringing the ball up the court. No one's pressuring him because he can get by them. He's a big, strong guy.
Yep.
He got to the rim whenever he wanted to. He danced around a three-point line and hit a couple deep threes. I mean, that's what he does, right? And then you look at Caruso, 17 points. I mean, Danny Green did what Danny Green does in a lot of playoff situations. He had 13 points. He had a couple threes. I mean, look, man, I was watching this game and I'm thinking, all right, if Dion and Caruso, not that I expect them to give us 35 points or whatever, but if they can play, if they can be productive, there's no room for Rajon Rondo. Sorry, folks who like Rondo, but there is no room to squeeze Rondo back in this rotation. If Waiters and Caruso is who we expect them to be, and oh, by the way, if KCP and Danny Green are doing what they're supposed to do, then you break the glass and bring in JR. I don't see where you bring in Rondo, man. So I'm really pleased at what I saw. And honestly, I'm glad that the Lakers bench players just didn't throw this thing away and say, screw it. We don't have LeBron, Anthony Davis. They came out and they wanted to win. And I'm most pleased about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think on the timeline today was the first time I saw as often. This was like the first time that I saw multiple Laker fans on the timeline. I don't follow that many people in general on Twitter, but because there's always people always arguing and stuff. I just don't want to fill up my timeline with people, politics and people arguing and stuff like that. But of the accounts that I follow, which are really knowledgeable Laker folks, This is the first time where I think a lot of people were like, all right, Rondo doesn't need to rush back. Like it's, take your time, that sort of thing. And, like I understand that Rondo's IQ is really important, but I think ability and IQ are two different things. And I think we've talked about it before. It may be more beneficial for him to just be an extra pair of eyes, an extra brain for these guys to kind of do it. And, Rondo doesn't, I know Rondo is a stubborn guy in that it seems like he believes in his ability to still play. But I wonder if specifically in this situation, when he is able to come back, he may suit up, but I think I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to Vogel and says, look, especially if through the 8 games, the Lakers look really good if in the minutes that he's being replaced, or as Waiters or JR replaces minutes. I wouldn't be surprised if he says, look, just keep it going the way it's going. If you need me, I'm here in case you need me, that sort of thing. I don't think he's going to try and kind of force his way back. The Lakers earlier this year when Bradley got hurt and KCP was doing well, there was a lot of chatter on the timeline about, well, KCP should permanently replace Bradley. And, when Bradley was healthy, Vogel gradually integrated him back into the starting lineup. I think he gave him some minutes and then eventually came back completely. I don't think Vogel's going to do that this time around because there is no real defensive drop-off if you think about it. Like Waiters is a much better, offensive player than Rondo is. He's making all the great passes that Rondo makes as well, and making like the right reads and stuff like that. And he's not like, I think the first 2 scrimmages, he was kind of lost on defense, but as you can see with like more reps, he's getting better at making sure that he picks up his guy in transition and that sort of stuff. So if there's no defensive drop off, then I mean, there's not really much to argue there in regards to his role. So I'm sure mainstream media will be like, oh, Rondo's coming back. This is going to be a hard decision for the Lakers to figure out. Like, are they going to have roster turmoil? Is Rondo going to cause problems? I don't think any of that stuff is going to happen. But, overall, I'm just glad. And, we got the Clippers on Thursday, so we'll get our first look at seeing how this Waiters integration works, how the Lakers look. Everything so far makes me think that the Lakers' main rotation guys, probably outside of Markieff, because we haven't seen him too much just yet. They're sharp. Everybody's on the same page, and I think that's the thing that probably Laker fans should take away from these 3 scrimmage games. That these guys look really sharp. They look like they're ready for the regular season to start again. We've all made it out more or less. The Lakers have all made it out more or less with, with really minor issues, Anthony Davis's eye poke, that sort of thing. And some, slight ankle tweaks in here, but we made it out healthy, now granted, we still got to try and stay healthy, but I feel good. I feel good about their chances. And the other thing is also this: Lakers have no pressure in these 8 games. Like they only need to win 3 if they want to lock up the first seed for the Western Conference. There's no home court, so it doesn't matter. We need to catch up to the Bucks. So I'm looking forward to Thursday, man. This is the last Lakers versus Clippers. Obviously everybody's penned in the Clippers as our biggest, the team that's going to keep us from the finals. So I don't know how much stock you put into that game, to be honest. Like it may just be for bragging rights, so then nobody can tell us that, we're 1-2 against the other LA team. But I'm just curious to see how sharp they look, how Davis and Braun and Dion Waiters in for like 30 minutes or 35 minutes, because I think Vogel's going to start ramping up their minutes a little bit more to get them fresh. So I'm excited, man. I'm just excited. I'm happy official regulation basketball is going to be back on Thursday, and the Lakers can continue their quest for that championship. So I'm excited. That's all I can pretty much say about that.
I mean, I think with the Clippers game, like, look, whatever team wins, their respective fan base is gonna go on social media and act a fool. I mean, that's just what the fan base is doing on NBA Twitter. But it's important to look at it as both these teams have been off for a really long time. Whoever wins, I wouldn't put too much stock into it. Even if the Lakers could blow them out, and I would say I'm happy, but like the Clippers are still better than a blowout, right? Or even if it's a close win, whatever happens in that first game, we're not going to learn anything new about either team. So I'm looking beyond that. I'm waiting to after these 8 seeding games, let these guys catch a rhythm and then see what they look like in the playoffs. That's when we'll really start to see what they really look like after this long layoff. I mean, man, the Lakers, these guys look in shape. They look serious. It feels like, they were prepared their entire time for the NBA to come back. Like they didn't go into this thinking, well, maybe the season won't come back. They went into this thinking we're still gonna have a shot at a championship.
Yeah.
And they're performing that way. And I'm looking at this roster, and I tweeted this out earlier, man. And I only mentioned Dion and JR, and I just said Rob Pelinka deserves Executive of the Year.
Yeah.
Not specifically because of those two players, but the entire roster. First off, getting Anthony Davis after the whole Magic Johnson debacle.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as just because he's a client of clutch that he was going to be a Laker. Right? People oversimplify that. But he did get Anthony Davis. The Lakers had the best record in the Western Conference. They've had it all year long. And he brought in all these guys that, people laughed at. And then you get the JR and Dion. And in these scrimmages, they've done exactly what we've needed them to do. Like, I know they're scrimmages, but the point is, JR hadn't played in a year, or longer
2
than
years.
2 years.
Yeah, almost 2 years, yeah.
Dion hadn't played in a year, so for two dudes that haven't played in that long to come off the street and to perform, I give them a lot of credit, man, for staying in shape. Yep. Whatever happened with Dion in Miami, it damn sure not happening in LA. Like you can see, it. And sometimes I know people like to blame the players. I understand Pat Riley runs a tight ship there, but sometimes the environment, you just get tired of the environment. Like people like to give a lot of praise to Bill Belichick with the Patriots or Greg Popovich in San Antonio. I'm not saying they're not great coaches, but at a certain point, some of these guys are just like, all right, man, like enough's enough. Like it just, sometimes things just happen.
Yeah.
And for Rob Pelinka to get Markieff, to get Dion, and to get JR, 3 contributors without having to trade away a player or a draft pick. Like he deserves way more praise than I don't think he's getting any praise, honestly. I don't think anyone's talking about it.
I read the, over the weekend, I was talking about Zach Lowe's logic about why Anthony Davis is like 3rd on his defensive player rankings and like how like his logic just didn't make any sense. So I won't get into that now because it's not what we're talking about. But he also didn't have Rob Pelinka as even the top 3 candidate for Executive of the Year. And I think one of the things that I mentioned way when that athletic poll came out and they were talking about like who's going to get MVP, who's going to get Defensive Player of the Year. And I think that's initially when we kind of heard about executives putting like Rudy Gobert as number 2 and like Rob not getting any mention, Vogel not getting any mention, that sort of stuff. And I think so. One of the things that I kind of mentioned is, the media business is something, in the sense that like it is an industry that's based on not being able to predict what's going to happen, but it being able to be like educated, like to make an educated guess. Let's just say it that way, right? Based on the data, based on the plug and playness of this player and this player, I expect this team to be like this. Based on the trajectory of this guy's career, I expect him to go down this way. And I think this year, a lot of teams projected, even with Anthony Davis being added to the Lakers, I think a lot of experts genuinely didn't think, at first I thought, okay, maybe they're just doing it for Laker outrage, because that's a thing. People write to get Laker fans upset because they know that we're going to retweet stuff and send it out. But I think there's probably some analysts out there that genuinely thought, and it's not, I don't know if it's a majority, if it's half of them, however many, but they genuinely thought the Lakers would not be good this year. And for those specific folks, the analysts that have votes, all NBA votes or don't, after seeing that, I didn't think that they would give guys like Rob a shot. I didn't think that they would give guys like Vogel a shot when it comes to these accolades, because then you would be basically eating crow by doing that. Like you'd be basically admitting like, I was wrong. Vogel is an excellent coach. He's not just somebody who's warming the seat for Jason Kidd. Because that was a thing, right? Like, oh, Rob Pelinka is a good executive. He's in constant communion with his best players, as well as, like other folks that are on the team, coaches, trainers, that sort of stuff. He's not just somebody who's being, operated on like there's a shadow basketball, president of basketball operations. So there are things, and then, to be fair, it's not outside of LA. Like ESPN LA media was projecting that incompetence on both Frank Vogel and Rob Pelinka. So it's not like it's like, oh, it's somebody in Boston saying that. Obviously, Jackie McMullen's going to say something bad about the Lakers anyways in whatever way she wants to. But it was our own folks that were doing the same thing because they didn't believe in him, at least in terms of confidence. And you're right. Your original point was Rob Pelinka should get consideration for Executive of the Year. I know a lot of people are going to go and say, well, he just signed a bunch of clutch clients, so Rich Paul is running the Lakers. There is something to be said about having a good relationship with like power agents where you end up getting talent that wants to come and play for you. Dion Waiters also could have gone somewhere else, right? J.R. Smith may not have had a market, but maybe he did have a market, and obviously he chose to go to Lakers because they're all contenders. I think the most shining example of that is Markieff Morris. There was no noise whatsoever about Markieff Morris leaving the Detroit Pistons to go anywhere. Yep. There was, we had mentioned on a podcast, what feels like decades ago at this point, about how the Lakers should target Markieff Morris because he's a good fit and he's inexpensive. And if they can just give up a second rounder, or I even suggested like if they have to give up Caruso, we should do it because we really need a guy like him. I'm glad that we did it. And I'm glad that Rob Pelinka is smarter than me because he ended up getting him for free. Now, if that's because of his relationship with Rich Paul doesn't have any incentive to send Markieff Morris to the Lakers.
Right.
He doesn't represent Markieff Morris anymore. Right. And so maybe there was a connection there. Maybe Rob was able, Rich Paul still had a phone, had Markieff's number in his phone. Maybe he reached out. Maybe he talked to somebody at Rock. I think Rock Nation represents the Morris brothers right now. But maybe Rob talked to somebody at Rock Nation and said, hey, do you guys know if Markieff is interested in playing for a contender? Those kind of things matter. And for as much as like we want to say that like there's Rich Paul has X amount of influence and stuff like that, just go and look and see what the Knicks are doing over there. They went and got a creative artists agency, I think is the name of the agency. They went and got a CAA guy in Leon Rose to basically do the same role that Rob Pelinka is going to do. They're hiring these guys that are former agents and guys who are in the industry like that. Don't be surprised if CAA starts getting their clients to go to the Knicks. And I'm not just talking about like role players. I'm talking about premier clients that could end up going that way. That's just the way the game is turning out, And so that's one of the things that I think people say that Rob shouldn't get credit for, but other franchises get credit for, right? Woj was out there saying, well, Reggie Jackson's waiting on an offer. Reggie Jackson's waiting on an offer. And then all of a sudden, boom, he goes with the Clippers. But Laker fans were on the timeline telling you that Reggie Jackson's agent is the same agent as Paul George's agent. He's going to go to the Clippers. So anybody that says that, oh, Lakers are trying to go for Reggie Jackson, we're not. Because we know that the agent, that's how the agent business works. And, your crossover media, you just had an agent on there who kind of talked about the relationship that agents have and stuff like that. So, out of all these different awards that go on, I don't expect LeBron to get MVP. Giannis has just had too good of a season, and people love using very, very advanced metrics, the PIPM and the Raptor and all these different acronyms that they come up with. And the advanced metrics do help, support Giannis's claim. I don't think LeBron's going to get it. Defensive player of the year, you just have to watch those two play. Like you just have to watch Anthony Davis play defense and then watch Giannis play defense and see how much of the impact that they have when they're on and off the court to really make that. So I don't know if Anthony Davis get it, but I really do feel that Rob should get a shot at that, a serious consideration for that executive of the year shot. And I think Vogel should get some awards, or not awards, but votes for coach of the year. Nick Nurse is an awesome, coach. So I don't really have any problem if Nick Nurse gets it. It's totally cool. Right. But like that defensive player of the year, executive of the year, I mean, considering the Lakers did have to navigate Kobe's death. That was a thing. The Lakers did have to navigate a media climate in which executives on their team were being called incompetent, that didn't know how to do cap math, right? Yep. And these were entire storylines that were being run. And I just, my overarching point is, I don't know if the media will eat crow. I don't know if the media will turn around and say, you know what? I know I wrote this story about Rob Pelinka not knowing how to use a calendar, but he should get executive of the year. That it's not going to happen. And so, but I think you're right, man. Like all of these moves are all like on the margins. They're all rising tide moves. Yeah. The Lakers are already great. They just need to plug a few holes. And I think he's made all the right moves to do that for us.
Look, man, it's a relationship business. That's why these teams are hiring agents.
Yeah.
I mean, the days of hiring a former player to run your front office or someone that worked their way up the ranks, that's still going to happen, but it's a relationship business. So if all things are equal, the money is equal for most of these teams. I mean, sure, LA, the Lakers have an advantage because of LA, the media, you know, the media that's out in LA, and then, you know, 16 championships helps too. But if the guy running the team is your former agent, I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer that you had a good relationship with them. And so that's why you're seeing more teams turn to agents. And I think you and I both know this. We're going to see more of that. You're going to see more high-profile agents, not the guys you've never heard of. I'm talking about the top guys who they've been agents for 10, 20, 30 years. They've made a lot of money doing it already. Maybe they want a new challenge. And whether it's the Lakers, Knicks, or some other large organization is going to give them a call and say, hey, how would you like to come work for us for $10 or $15 million a year? Yeah. And they're going to take that money. And oh, by the way, they're just going to convince all their old clients to come there. And they still have connections to their old agency. So like you said with CAA, or even Rob Pelinka, you know, he had a boutique agency, so I know he had to divest himself from it. Yeah. He still has connections to all those people that took over his clients. Like, of course. So that's where this business is going. And so people need to get used to that. I do want to ask you this, man, because it was all over the timeline yesterday, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but Lou Williams. I took it from a more serious perspective in that, look, he was approved to leave the bubble. And as he, you know, and that was the right thing. Whether, you know, look, Magic City is a strip club. I get it that they've got good food. But it is very bad optics for a player to show up at a strip club, whether it's a restaurant or not, right? Like the optics is bad. Yeah. The optics are bad when you show up with the with the NBA issued mask on. The optics are bad when a rapper tweets out that you're in there and then deletes it and then tries to lie about it. And then like everybody knows he's like, all of that is just bad, right? There's no reason to cover it up if you were there doing the right thing. Right. So, the NBA, I think, quarantined him for 10 days. Yeah. And I mean, he's not going to be there for our first game against the Clippers, but how do you feel about that?
No, I was gonna say they have Reggie Jackson. They've been playing Reggie Jackson. They just got Pat Beverly back. Like, obviously they'll lose scoring, but there are some very smart folks. Shout out to Jason Maples, who I think he tweeted this, that Lou Williams actually takes shots away from Kawhi in clutch moments, which is something I've discussed with him before, and I didn't want to say anything until like if the Lakers actually played them in the Western Conference Finals, because I didn't want to like reveal that to Lakers Nation, that it's actually better that Lou Will shoots the ball instead of Kawhi, because you know Kawhi's just standing off in the corner not doing anything, so that's probably better. But it was a very tactful observation on his part. But were you going to ask me like what are my thoughts on like his whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, the league, it came out today. I think Mark Stein said the league is spending $180 million. I think a day to make this thing. Was it a day? What was it?
Yeah,
was it a month?
People, let's get that clear. People have been saying that like, oh, it's $1 billion bubble. First of all, if it was $1 billion bubble, they would have canceled the season already. They're not spending that kind of money. I think the overall number comes out to like $100 to $200 million total for the entire stretch in the bubble. That's what it is. It's not $1 billion. That doesn't even sound like good math by like good, like it almost sounds like you're spending that much money to save that much money. So that wouldn't make any sense. But I think it's like 100 to 200 million or something like that. So, but go ahead. Yeah.
Like whether I'm a Lakers fan or not, the league has to take it seriously, because you can't have players. You just can't have this happen. And you certainly can't have the integrity of the bubble compromised because a dude, like, look, we know how this works, man. Let's say he had went somewhere. Let's say he had went anywhere else and got caught there. And God forbid Lou caught the coronavirus and gives it to someone in the bubble. That's one thing. If he catches it at a strip club, the media, it's going to be a shitstorm because it's a strip club. And so particularly like, Black folks are usually well aware of the optics of things, right? Like really well aware of the optics. Yeah. And so he's on Twitter arguing his point. And shout out to my man Mike, one of my co-hosts from OTR. He said the wings at Magic City are fire. Maybe they are. I don't believe in eating wings where ass is at. That's just me. That's just me. But man, okay.
So
what do you think? Man?
Okay, I'll give you my back. Okay, so my wife is from Georgia, right? So she's from Atlanta area. She went to Georgia Tech for grad school. She went to Georgia State for undergrad. So she was part of a black sorority and stuff like that too as well. So like I used to live in Georgia, but for a very short period of time, like maybe 1 year at the most when I was really young. So when I married her, like I used to hang out with all of her friends and all that sort of stuff. And one of the things that I learned a few years back is in Atlanta, the strip club scene is the club scene. So it's just like, and so for folks who are not familiar with that, I think it was, I forgot who it was. I think it may have been Taylor Rooks that tweeted like in defense of Lou Williams, like that's kind of where people party. They don't go to clubs. I mean, they go to clubs, but like on the West Coast, a lot of people go to bars and lounges. But in Atlanta, they go to strip clubs, right? So I think a few months back, there's that picture of Kawhi, and there's like a stripper dancing in front of him and stuff like that. That story happened. And I think they were in Atlanta, I want to say, when that happened also. It was during, I think it was a game that he sat out against the Hawks. The Hawks made a huge comeback and they won that game. But that's how the scene works out here. So I understand why Lou went there. Also, Magic City, I guess they have his own specific lemon pepper wings that he gets. Like it's branded Lou Williams lemon pepper wings. That's what you want to go get. So I agree. I understand the real life aspect of going and getting it. Like I'm sure the NBA, there's like an honor system. Like, look, we're letting you go for this.
Sure.
So try to limit anything else outside of that. So if Lou went inside a club to go get food, I get that. I think what makes his situation worse than what it is exactly what you mentioned, the optics behind it, right? We both know how, probably even more than the NFL, we covered this on our last podcast, or I think 2 podcasts ago, the NBA has been very transparent with the rules and the quarantine rules and the expectations they have of their players. And everybody and anybody has been criticizing that to hell, like, oh, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. This is not going to work. Players won't be responsible. They won't, they won't do all this sort of stuff. And for the most part, the NBA has been, outstanding as it's related. There's guys that have left the bubble, have already come back, passed their quarantine test. They've done that. Lou's situation throws a huge ass wrench to that in that whole thing. So it's not a matter of like where he went. And I know people be, oh, it's a strip club and whatever your personal preference is. Culturally, it's different in Atlanta how they treat them. And people do eat at strip clubs, even if there are women dancing around scantily clad.
People eat it. There's one in DC. Well, I don't go to them anymore, but back when I did, there were a number of them, and you would never eat at a strip club in DC.
Okay,
a lot of folks come to stadium in DC now, and they do all that. But
so I mean, I optics wise, that's what it is. I tweeted out, like I didn't expect him to do anything. I didn't think they would suspend him or fine him or anything. All they do is they tell them, all right, you got to spend a couple more days in quarantine, and you have to pass a couple more. You have to like get register negative on a couple more tests. And I think that's basically what they've done. And so because of that, because it's a 10-day quarantine as opposed to like a 4-day quarantine, which I think is like what Zion had to do when he left and came back. He's got to miss 2 games. Does it matter to the Clippers? Probably not, because it's just 2 games. He'll still have 6 games to play. We don't need to get into schematically how it affects them and their chemistry and stuff like that. But like I said, I've seen that Kendrick Perkins and like the entire Clippers team now is going back and forth on the timeline right now.
No, that's stupid. Yeah.
And so, they're probably taking it to a level that it doesn't need to go to. And Lou is pretty beloved, like across the league when it comes to many players. So I would expect that to happen. But when somebody says the optics of that looks bad, they're right. The optics of that does look bad. Like mainly because the rapper made it seem like you guys are partying together and not just picking up food,
That was I think the rapper, I think it was on IG.
It was Jack Harlow. The Clipper fans should be more upset with Jack Harlow than they should be upset with anybody else for even posting that picture, knowing what situation that Lou Williams was in. I
think that's the thing. Like you post the thing and then you delete it and then you lie and say it's an old picture. like all that made it worse. Like,
and then after it's confirmed that Lou did what he did, he's like, he puts hashtag Clipper Nation.
yeah,
It's like, what are you doing? Like, you're just making this worse for him.
right. So I'm sure Adam Silver was like, okay, wait a minute. Like, we can't have this happen. Like,
Yeah,
we don't need any extra ridiculous attention on us.
Yeah.
Like, most people look at the league, look at the NBA like, okay, they've handled the quarantine and the bubble like better than every other league, sans maybe MLS and the WNBA.
Yes.
But football, I'm on record as saying I don't think the NFL plays this season. People don't agree with me. They can't get it right, man.
They came to an agreement. Right. Adam Schefter reported the NFL came to an agreement with their players on a restart for this. I think it's for the restart of the season. And I have heard nothing about that. Nothing at all. I have no idea how often they're going to be testing, where they're going to be playing, if it's going to be the same regular schedule or what it is. So it's going to be crazy. And I just want to say one last thing on that Lou Williams thing. Me and you have talked off the record about this, but now that you've expanded into crossover, I think we can discuss it now. Folks need to understand, and I think Lou understands this, so I'm not really concerned about him. But folks need to understand this, that the bare minimum threshold for taking down a black athlete, no matter how prominent he is, right? Whether he's a role player like Lou Williams or Dwight Howard, or if he's somebody prominent like LeBron James, the threshold for like knocking him off his pedestal or bringing him down to earth is very low, very low. Dwight can go on an IG and just say, I don't believe in vaccines. And somebody at The Athletic will write an entire article about his feel-good season being completely unraveled. If anybody doesn't know what that headline is from, it's Bill Oram, who writes for the Lakers, who had a major headline that said, Dwight's season is unraveling because of that, right? And then some people just read the headlines, they don't read the actual content.
Right.
But this Lou Williams thing, however irresponsible you may feel it is an example of that. And one of the things that, we have to be aware of as fans is culturally how things are. And, the threshold that we also hold guys by. Did Lou Williams do something that was out of the ordinary, or something that maybe we would have done if we were in the same circumstance? Maybe we wouldn't have gone to a strip club to go get food. Maybe we still would have gone to go get food because I'm not
eating out anywhere. I'm still not.
Right. Fair. But you get what I mean? Like, it's like varying degrees of stuff when it comes to these sort of things. And, but in terms of managing the optics of the situation, being responsible for how, knowing that you represent not only yourself, you represent your team. And in this specific situation right now, you're representing the entire NBA. That's a big deal. And, I'm sure even the NBA didn't think something like that would happen with Lou. He's like a pretty, everywhere he's gone, players love him, executives love him.
The radar.
He's a nice guy. So it's unfortunate that happened to him because he's such a nice guy. It's just funny that it happened because we're Laker fans and we haven't had much to make fun of the Clippers about because they're the
street lights over spotlight.
They're the what I was gonna say. They're the toddler that you can't say anything bad about because they're just a young plucky upstart franchise apparently. So it is what it is. But they'll be fine. I think the Clippers will be fine and Lou will be fine, and the NBA will tell all the other players, don't do what Lou did. And if you have to go get food, don't be the one that goes in there and take it curbside or something like that. So it's just, if anything, it's just funny, right up to the restart.
I mean, growing up, my grandmother used to say, you learn who your friends are. And he went in there and a rapper decided to post pictures of him. And then a rapper decided to make jokes about the situation as the NBA released statements they were investigating. Yeah. You learn who your friends are, right? It didn't need to happen the way that it did. And, and I think everybody knows this. I'm certainly not attacking Lou because he's a black dude. Because
for sure. Yeah.
But from the very start of the coronavirus, not so much on this podcast, but on Off the Record, I've talked about it more. I have taken it beyond seriously. And I haven't eaten out in the last 4 months at all. And we're not going to, it's just not going to happen. So I felt like, God forbid, let one of those players come back with it. Obviously it would be a black player. Right. And then I can imagine what those headlines would look like if it was a black player.
Yeah.
And so that's why I said, you have to be aware of the optics. And my wife, when this was happening, she was like, well, how old is he? I'm like, well, he's not 20. He's like 33, 34. So he's old enough where I'm sure he knows what's going on. And then, but things catch fire on social media, and that's just kind of what happens. But it is funny that it's funny in that people talk about the Lakers would be a distraction, or the Lakers would be the one, and it's a Clippers player who's the quote unquote distraction and has to miss 2 games. Like, because had this been a Laker, it would have been an even bigger story.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the theme of the season, right? The Lakers don't have roster depth. LeBron's going to have to sit out games. Anthony Davis is fragile. The Lakers role players aren't very good. Like, it's all been like, I just keep using the word projection. People want the Lakers to be bad. They want to write about turmoil. They want to write about incompetence. They want to write about lack of success and failure. And look, let's be honest. Lakers have surpassed almost everybody's expectations, media and even probably fans alike. But the main thing is this. For Laker fans, we have to accept that the media, whether you feel they're biased or not, is going to consistently shift the goalposts. Only one team in the NBA, if you had to listen to the media, is going to tell you it's championship or bust. And that's the Lakers. Because if the Lakers don't win a championship, everything they've done so far has been a failure. But for any other team, I'm talking about Bucks, Clippers, Houston, all these other teams, it's just a season if they don't make it. They still have a great future. They have guys locked into contract. Giannis can just sign to Supermax, and it doesn't even matter. They have him for another 6 years. Now, for them, it's their championship window. But for the Lakers, it's always championship or bust. And I'm here to tell Laker fans, from my perspective at least, that this season is not, obviously championship or bust in the sense that we want to win championships every year. But the Lakers championship window is much longer than folks realize. LeBron James is an incredible athlete. And I have no reason to believe that his game is going to have that cliff fall off that people think that it's going to have. And if anything, we have really, really smart coaches around us that have taken a bunch of old veteran guys and have put a very competitive scheme behind them. So I have no reason to believe that with more first round picks and all that kind of stuff, that like there's going to be like this huge drop off aside from some catastrophic injury or something like that. So
sure.
It's just we just got to get. This is what Laker basketball is about. You already know this. 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002. Every single year, the Lakers are going to fall apart. Lakers are going to fall apart. They're going to keep saying it because they want to speak it into existence. So Laker fans just got to be patient, keep that underdog chip on our shoulders, and hey man, we're the underdog team. We're not the favorites. So we got to keep our fingers crossed and hope everything falls in our favor.
Well said, man. Well, let's close out on that. I do want to say shout out to Kyrie Irving donating $1.5 million to the WNBA players who have opted not to play for whatever various reason they've decided. A lot of people called him crazy and a lot of other stuff. And here this man is leading the charge, donating to those women who did not play or could not play. So shout out to Kyrie, man. He gets he gets a bad rap.
Shout out to Kyrie, and also shout out to the WNBA and the NWSL. I hope I got that acronym right, but it's the Women's Soccer League and it's the WNBA. A lot of people are giving the NBA credit for their whole bubble idea because of what's going on with the NFL and the MLB. And I think the Marlins game or something that ended up just getting canceled today. But women's sports should also get a lot of credit for doing exactly what the NBA has done, or if anything, pioneering what the NBA has now started to do. And like, I'm surprised that they weren't getting acknowledged for it, but they did also like run a successful blueprint. And so far everything's been pretty good for them. So shout out to Kyrie Irving, shout out to all the women that are playing sports right now. And shout out to all the folks that are helping make those leagues successful as well as the NBA successful. I can do nothing else but look at my laptop and wait and see if the NFL will work or if the MLB will work. And I hope it does. Those athletes should get paid.
I agree.
We just know that those leagues are run a little bit differently when it comes to these other leagues. So, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that, I know a lot of football fans, popular sport in America, and I know they want them to play, but player safety should be at the forefront of all that stuff. So, WNBA, give me one of them orange hoodies, man. I could use one. And
Give it to me for free, and I'll donate whatever that hoodie costs to a charity or whatever. But
yeah,
shout out to the WNBA.
Yeah, I made a promise to myself. I made a promise to my wife also that I would cover the WNBA more. So a lot of Laker fans, if you're not Sparks fans, get ready because you're going to be getting a lot of Sparks content from me as well. And especially after Kobe's passing, like it kind of made me think that if I love basketball that much, I shouldn't be focused on just the men's side of the sport. So I'm going to try and expand some of my writing and be able to catch some of the Sparks games, and then try and share that with Laker fans and help bring some more awareness of how good that team is.
Hey, the Sparks are the second most decorated LA basketball team out there. So I mean, they are. It
is true. It is true. Very true.
I think the Lakers and Sparks are the only NBA team and WNBA team to win a championship in the same year, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. So, and shout out to because we're giving shout out to the Dodgers fans who are very hardcore Laker fans too as well. That the Venn diagram of Dodger fans and Laker fans is one big ass circle. So, I'm rooting for them to be successful this year too. I know they really want that World Series.
Vinay, tell everybody where they can find you, man.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at VKillum. That's literally the only place you'll find me. I have a newsletter that I do every week. You can subscribe there. It's free. And yeah, that's about it.
All right, everybody, man. You see the emblem on the hat. Like I said to start the show, Crossover Media. It's my new company. Laker Central is under that umbrella now, so make sure you follow Crossover Media. Check out the new podcast we dropped today, the Crossover Podcast with Wes Austin, NBA agent. We've got like 8 more interviews coming, and I'm so backed up with interviews. It's nuts. The support that I've gotten for that new show is amazing, but the support I've gotten overall for all these podcasts that I'm doing is amazing. So shout out to everybody that supports us. Follow me at Laker Central CEO. Follow Laker Central at Laker Central 365. And I'm Alex, and this is Laker Central.